If you want to feel more connected to humanity and a little less alone, listen to Beautiful Anonymous. Each week, I take a phone call from one random anonymous human being. There's over 400 episodes in our back catalog. You get to feel connected to all these different people all over the world. Recent episodes include one where a lady survived a murder attempt by her own son. But then the week before that, we just talked about Star Trek. It can be anything. It's unpredictable. It's raw. It's real. Get Beautiful Anonymous wherever you listen to podcasts.
Dearest fantasy readers, welcome to the Dear Fantasy Reader podcast, where two best friends, Hannah and Karen, travel through the pages of our favorite romantasy novels. Join us as we take flight into the world of the Empyrean series, diving deep into the chapters, exploring characters, scenes, theories, foreshadowing, and more, taking what we've learned from the second book, Iron Flame, to reread and re-experience the first.
With that content warning and spoiler alert, we will be covering anything and everything Empyrean series to this date and any content Rebecca Yarros has given us. Also, due to the nature of these books, this podcast is rated R in content and in language.
As Rebecca Yarros says, readers who may be sensitive to these elements, please take note and prepare to enter Basgiath War College. It makes us giggle every time. It's like part of it. It's part of the intro now. We have a new addition to our Rebecca Yarros archives, the new Onyx Storm excerpt. If you hadn't heard, it was just released just a few days ago in Cosmopolitan magazine. We did record a bonus episode of our reactions and first thoughts, which were very first thoughts, very fresh, because we both read it for the first time while filming that episode. So if you haven't watched already, we will link both the excerpt and our bonus episode on it down in the show notes.
Oh, it was so good.
It is. I'm like, my wheels have been turning in my brain for the past couple of days. Even things I knew were suspicious. I'm like, wait, does this mean this? And this is this. I cannot, guys, we're 2 episodes out from the end of this season, which is bittersweet, but it's also super exciting because that means we get to, one, do another reread of Iron Flame, which we're going to be doing in the midst of prepping for some Onyx Storm episodes in preparation for Onyx Storm. So I'm like really excited.
I'm so excited.
I think it's going to be really interesting because we've picked up so many new things throughout this third reread than I even had in my second one.
Right.
Way deeper, of course. We've spent we're going on 30 hours. I think we will hit the 30-hour mark for this season by the end. So we are going to be rereading Iron Flame. And I think because we've got just a short time between now and Onyx Storm's release, really trying to condense to the very most important things to talk about and theorize about before we get to that book. So that when we do, we're just diving straight into all that is Onyx Storm. So
I need so many questions answered. I can't wait.
And so many that I know she's gonna hold out for. Anyways, this book, right? Now, time for our summary report of chapters 34 and 35 from our personal scribe informant, Karen.
We take flight with Violet outside of the wards for the very first time to Athben with Xaden's hand-picked squad for the last wargame. So they think. They stop by a lake for the dragons to hydrate, where Liam asks Violet how she's doing with the whole Xaden situation and gives a strange warning to Violet about Xaden's priorities. Shortly after, Xaden approaches and takes Violet's hand in a very not Xaden-like public display of affection before he leads them to a private area where they share an intimate kiss. Suddenly, they are interrupted by a drift of Griffin riders, and while everyone is surprised, only Violet is ready to attack. Before she gets the chance, Xaden and Liam pin her arms behind her back, both apologizing. The pieces begin to fall into place. Xaden has been working with the Griffin Riders to aid the enemy. Serena, the lead Griffin Rider, warns Xaden that Venom attacked a nearby village and Violet's world is turned upside down. Venom are real. And Xaden, well, this must mean he's a traitor. Another Griffin Flyer asserts that no Soaring Gale would ever risk their neck to save anyone beyond the Navarian border before proposing taking Violet for ransom. But Xaden shuts that down quickly, threatening to kill him if he takes one step towards that Soaring Gale. The Flyers leave, and Violet pieces together that everyone around her, even her dragons, were keeping this secret, and she is overcome with blinding betrayal, turning to Liam and questioning whether they were ever friends and how he could watch her fall in love with Xaden. Xaden attempts to explain himself. They have been smuggling weapons to the Griffin Riders so they could defend their civilians from Venom. Violet quickly shifts from denial to realization when she recalls her father's letter from the Book of Fables, and she grapples with the horrific implications. Xaden insists that he has never lied to her and only hid what they were doing from her for all of their safety, as Dane could steal her memories and put everything in jeopardy at any given moment. He explains that this was the real reason Devar executed his father, and he couldn't risk losing her too. Still blindsided by betrayal, Violet sharply asserts that her love for him was based on lies and deception, but that she does believe him. As they take flight for Aspen, Taryn apologizes for making a choice to protect her without her consent and assures her that it won't happen again. Slowly, more pieces of the puzzle begin to click. Her dad had spelled it out for her in the Forbidden Fables, and the archives were missing 200 years worth of history. They arrive at Aspen and quickly realize that the outpost had been abandoned, but not for war games. Xaden quickly asks Violet if Dane had touched her face after he told her about Aspen. Violet says yes, but that he would never steal her memories like that. Just then, Garrick hands Xaden a missive addressed to him from Colonel Atos. Survive if you can. Suddenly, it sinks in. Dane did steal her memories and told his dad she had unknowingly betrayed Xaden, betrayed all of them, and they had been sent here to die.
These two chapters.
Oh my gosh.
This is where you said Violet's world flipped upside down. The entire book, all it, like everything you think is happening and going on, just U-turns, does a couple sideways backflips. Like,
oh my gosh.
So much happens. It's such a good set. I'm excited to get into it. So drum roll, Dragon Riders, as we are in for 2 chapters worth of betrayal.
Yes, that's the only word for it.
Yeah. So I want to start off with this conversation with Liam at the lake where he expresses to Violet that he's concerned, that she's in over her head because he knows what Xaden's priorities are, which now makes a hell of a lot more sense knowing what we do and still just how much we don't know.
Right. Liam knows about the revolution. He knows that Xaden is heir to the Tyrandor throne. He knows about the missions Xaden has been running. And as Xaden says later, this is bigger than just the 2 of them. Right. And Liam knows this, and he's just really looking out for her here.
He is. It's one of those things where, like, I feel like on this reread, I'm actually Liam's perspective because I get Violet's in the right. And I get Xaden's in the right. So I feel like, I don't know if that's a good way to put it, but it helps me put it into words, I think. But he also goes on to tell Violet to hear Xaden out later at the point that shall not be discussed just yet. So even though this is a less than glowing recommendation, it does still show that Liam is being reasonable because these are two people he cares deeply for.
Absolutely. Ugh.
Okay, let's talk about Xaden breaking his own rule, coming up and lacing his hand with the violets in front of everyone. What a statement. This, to me, makes a lot more sense, knowing now that his hesitation was about Violet's reputation of being seen with a marked one in a relationship, I should say. Not just any given superior ranking officer, whatever, in the Quadrant, because in this scene, they're only around marked ones, and he knows he can trust them not to go off and gossip.
Yeah. This is his family, and he feels very comfortable around them.
Oh. Wait.
Are we emotional?
Yes. Well, especially, I don't know. In your first read, you're with Violet, right? Like you are feeling this sense of, you don't really like recognize necessarily that Xaden has put together only a group of marked ones. We get why that makes sense. But from, a Navarian propaganda standpoint, that is a scary situation to be in. So anyways. So Violet and Xaden sneak away for what starts as like him massaging her thighs, which, okay, and then leads to a make-out session. I wish so badly that we could stay in this small stretch of bliss forever. Like, can Onyx Storm just be, before this moment, after Violet said I love you, like that, this stretch, I could just stay in this. If we just have 3 more books of that, I am not set up for success. But after this point, everything, it turns upside down. They finally admitted feelings for each other. Things are cheeky and romantic, and then bam.
I 100% agree with you because it ended so quickly. Way too quickly for my taste.
Right.
And like, can Violet just stay happy for just a little bit longer?
Because when she is happy, I am happy.
Right.
No, I don't think that's going to be the case. Now, I'm waiting for this happily ever after that Rebecca is talking about. But in the meantime, I think we are in for it, guys. If these 2 chapters foreshadow anything for us, it is that. Anyway, I cannot tell you how many gasps I gasped reading this scene, finding out that Xaden was working with the Griffin Flyers. I felt all of the things Violet was feeling: betrayal, confusion, more confusion. The more that Xaden spoke, the worse it got.
Yeah, me too. I was feeling all of those things too. And it was not something I expected at all, especially Xaden working with the Griffin Flyers.
Right.
But even more than him working with the Griffin Flyers, that they aren't all bad like we've been told. Like, I'm not going to lie, on my first read, when Xaden like held Violet so she couldn't strike, that is whenever I felt the most betrayed, because I was like, wait, everyone around was right about him and he doesn't actually love Violet. We quickly learned that's not true, thankfully. Yeah. But that was my initial gut punch reaction.
Same. And I was really scared that he actually didn't love her too, right? Like that it was all fake. And that's why the rest of this book from this point is so chaotic, because your perspective on things shift every few seconds. And it's like whiplash from all these twists.
Yeah.
And I will say I could feel that the Griffin Flyers were misunderstood. Like, I figured, because we've been hinted at Venom being real, that they were really the bad guys. We'd find that out. But not at all did I think we would actually like come face to face on page experience Griffin Flyers so soon, much less that Xaden was directly aiding them, which even having the hint early on, or like was clued in early on that they weren't like necessarily fully bad like we were made to believe, I still felt like, oh no, this is much worse than I thought. This is, yeah, he's not great. Dane might have been right. Like all of those things past that. Yes. Yeah.
Well, especially whenever they got stationed with Mira's and Montserrat, they were getting attacked by Griffin flyers at that point. So really the only experience we've had with them was bad. So you just assume at this point, or I did.
No. I mean, I still, I thought that the Venom would come up before Griffin. I don't know why. But then once the Griffin flyers came up, I was like, oh, maybe it's the next book that the Venom come into play. Nope. There's so many little twists in this, which I love, by the way.
Yeah.
When I read a book, I know that the structure is coming to where there's going to be a twist, and some seem more obvious. And this one was kind of a situation where Venom coming in at the end seemed more obvious.
Yeah.
But one, I didn't expect the twist to be these, which is more fun, right?
Right.
So all of that to say, yes, I did pretty much see the Venom thing coming, as they were mentioned too many times as folklore. And after Papa Sorrengail's letter, it was confirmed for me, essentially. But I'm curious what your reaction was to this reveal.
Yeah, it was after reading the letter from her dad. That's whenever I thought they have to come up again. And like you just said, I had no idea that it would be so soon or during a war game.
Right.
That they were sent out for the school competition. Mm-hmm. It never crossed my mind that that could be something that they deal with during this competition.
I had a really hard time understanding what wards were on my first read.
Yeah.
So I think if I had understood the connection to Griffin riders, I knew they couldn't use magic in the wards, so that kind of set me up for understanding that the Griffins could attack. But I didn't quite understand that it was like a magical shield and that I didn't grasp it. So that ignorance, if you will, actually set me up to be able to be surprised. So.
Love that.
Yeah.
Ignorance is bliss.
Ignorance is bliss. It is. Well, and now we know that this is not all that Xaden was hiding, too.
Oh,
so it's like, it just keeps piling on for him.
Yeah.
Xaden's reaction to the one flyer saying a Sorrengail would never defend people outside of their own borders, and then proposing to take her for ransom. And he used his shadows. He used his shadows and stated, you take a step toward that Sorrengail and you'll be dead before you can even shift your weight. That is how I knew that they were going to be okay. That Violet and Xaden were going to be okay. That he wasn't like just wanting her dead, right?
Yeah.
That's the moment I knew.
And that is Hannah's favorite thing whenever this shadow daddy will use his signet to protect his woman.
It is. Well, and it is because I say it all the time. It's like a blend of romance and magic.
Yeah.
Like using your ability in a romantic way.
Yeah.
That's what gets me.
Yeah. And then him using his shadows, at least she shouldn't have to question if Xaden was setting her up to die.
Right.
Even though she was a little concerned about that later whenever he pulls out the alloy dagger to give her.
She was on edge. Can you blame her for being on edge here? I do not blame her for not catching that.
I don't, but he was also protecting her, so.
She could have also seen it like, she's my bargaining chip. You aren't. So I could see there's a lot of situations, right, that Violet understandably, some not, misinterprets.
Yeah.
I could see that being where she was like, fuck. And I still think here, she still isn't quite sure. In that moment, she's thinking that they're all, like all of her Xaden chosen squad, right, is going to be as surprised. And like, she says she realizes at one point, oh, I am the only one that's not surprised. And I am the only one that's like ready to fight. Because everybody else knows them, essentially.
Oof.
So at that point, she's not actually questioning things other than being confused.
The chapters of betrayal.
Yeah. And it just keeps building.
Yeah. I have a question. Because I'm trying to remember specifically about something. So the Griffin Flyers don't actually know who Brennan is, right? Because their comments about Soaring Gales not defending people outside of their own borders made me wonder if I'm remembering that correctly. So I just want to make sure.
So I had this in our foreshadowing section, but that was exactly my thought. I think the rebellion has been so hush-hush. Remember, even the marked ones are only told the bare minimum that they need to know. But they might know him and not know that he's a Sorengale because remember, Brennan goes by a different last name so that people don't know who his mother is. It's a toss-up, but that line specifically made me think that they don't know that Brennan is a Sorengale and is fight. But, they could just not know about Orisha and them rebuilding.
That's true. If I was Xaden, I would keep as much as close to and he does, keep as much as close to the chest as possible.
Yeah. Well, and also, there's people above Xaden, right? Like, he's on the council, but he's also so young. So there's a lot going on back at Orisha while Xaden, he can only get out for these missions.
Right.
That even Xaden's only told the bare minimum. So, like, he even stops them from telling them about where the Venom have attacked and stuff like that. Because he's like, oh, just only what we need to know. So regardless if they don't, the sentence still makes sense. They just don't connect. And it was also a really great way to remind us about Brennan, which has happened a couple times through these chapters where she thinks of Brennan specifically, and it was setting us up for the reveal at the end. So one of those things, it's like you're definitely not expecting Brennan to have been aiding the rebellion if he was even alive. If you saw that coming, which we'll get to me actually calling the end of that book later. But yes, that was the one thing I was certain of going through the book, that he was alive.
I feel like if you look at me whenever I'm reading this book the first time, not a thought behind my eyes about what's happening in the future.
Only
like,
because...
La, 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 proper name, common stuff, or whatever that quote is.
I think I'd actually thought, I didn't know that he was going to be on the rebellion side, first of all. So I wasn't expecting like that reveal at the very end of this book necessarily, but I just had the vibe that he was going to be alive. But I even thought to myself, like, he sounds like a really cool character. I'd really love to read about him. I hope he's alive.
Yeah.
I don't feel that way about him now, unfortunately. But yeah, that is. So it was just tying back to the topic at hand for this chapter. The Sorengale line, which I really loved that they included because then Violet did get to differentiate herself from any of the Sorengales, right? I wonder if Mira will stay the trap.
I hope so. I want Mira to be good.
I think one of our siblings is not going to be.
I think it's Brennan.
I think it's Brennan too. I don't know. Mira's really grown on me through this reread.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like her before this reread. But she's grown on me.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I had to sacrifice one, sorry, Brennan. Sending you to Malik. Dane first, though. I'm surprised that didn't come out of your mouth, Karen.
If I had thought of it, I would have said it.
We synced, actually. You sent that in, yeah. Anyways, so you mentioned that the moment that you felt most betrayed was when Xaden and Liam held Violet so she couldn't use her power.
Yeah.
Mine was when Violet realized that Tiernan and Darna knew and didn't tell her.
Oh my gosh.
Just gut punch. Like,
we've said
with
this,
a dagger.
It's betrayal after betrayal. Like, how did she survive that? Because I don't think that I could have survived all of this back to back. This all happens so quickly, like no time in between any of it. I don't know how she handled it, but I do agree with you that the dragons were like one of the toughest ones to stomach.
It was, and I think she was probably how Taryn handled it and how he explained himself. He goes on later and says that he couldn't tell her because dragons are bound by bonds, that there is only one other bond more sacred than that of a dragon and its rider. A mated bond, right? So he couldn't betray Sigale. But I do want to note that doesn't necessarily explain Endarna.
Oh, so true. I think that she was either following Taryn's lead or she knows way more that she can't or won't reveal yet. And again, for the safety of everyone involved, or if she can see into the future, she knows exactly when Violet needs to learn things.
That's an interesting theory that we've never talked about before. That's very likely. So it doesn't really matter to me necessarily. I think later on, Taryn goes in this and says, well, he does when he apologizes to her, which is its own topic in itself. But, he says that they made this choice, right? Yeah. So it sounded like Taryn was bound and Darna had some flexibility, but Taryn is an elder, not necessarily one of the elders, but an elder to her. And she tells us in Iron Flame how much she looks up to him.
Yeah.
Like, deeply admires him. It could just be that. And Darna has, at the very least, some sort of foresight intuition.
Yeah.
I will not jump on that pedestal right now. Let's talk about how Taryn corrected Andarna for trying to justify lying by omission and saying, quote, "We made a choice to protect you without your consent. It was an error that I won't make again." That is how you apologize. Right there.
Oh, so agree. It is one of the most sincere apologies I think we have seen from anyone this far. Admission, no excuses, and plans to change for the future.
Right. And as you have pointed out previously, he is 100 years old. So he should be the most mature out of all of them. But it was really refreshing. There was some accountability there.
Yeah.
And it also gave me faith that we just needed to hear the characters out. Like at that point, once I realized that Taryn and Darna were on Xaden's side, essentially, it's like, oh, okay, no, we're going to be good. We're good.
Yeah. And showing us that we should not jump to conclusions about anything.
This podcast is nothing but jumping to conclusions. And also not jumping to any conclusions. All at the same time. That is our new motto.
We just yapping in circles.
On the backs of dragons. So this scene where Violet asks Liam if they were ever truly friends. This we're just jumping from gut punch to gut punch. Like that is this episode today.
This is basically All Too Well. 10-minute version.
10-minute version. Yeah. That's me.
Punching you while you're down. Again.
This made my heart hurt. Yeah. I totally get Violet's feeling of betrayal here among everywhere else. I felt it too at first. But knowing that this is one of the last conversations that Liam and Violet ever have fucking hurts.
Hannah!
I'm sorry.
I hadn't even thought about how it was one of their last conversations before he died.
Babe, he has like 30 minutes left.
Oh my gosh. I could have gone my entire life without thinking about it.
Well.
Oh my gosh. It really is devastating for a multitude of reasons because Violet is questioning everything right now. But the thought that this is the person who she's grown so close to, not actually caring for her, it's too much for me to handle.
Well, and I also understand why she asked it. And it's set up perfectly for him to assure her later that he was really her friend. Beautiful writing, but also gut-wrenching.
No, I can't.
All right, moving on. Let's talk about Violet grappling with Venin being real. So she comes around to believing Xaden because of her father's letter and connects that the wards keep them safe at the expense of leaving innocents outside of the wards to die. And we really get to see Violet's goodness here and her susceptibility to propaganda when she assumes on instinct that Navarre must have no clue that innocents are dying or that they would be doing something. And Xaden has to point out the harsh reality that they do know and choose not to do anything about it because Navarre needs to hoard the only thing that kills venom in order to keep their wards up.
I do have to give Violet credit because she did come around to believing so quickly. And I think that it could have been really easy for her to be like, you're lying because this is not what I've been told my whole life. But everything she's ever known and believed came crashing down all at once. And she just couldn't believe that the leadership would leave those innocent civilians to die. And it was just hard to fathom that she's been living a lie.
Right.
It's a lot. It's the people that she thought were enemies this whole time aren't. And the people that she thought were going to protect them are.
It was a very in-your-face kind of like you have to decide in that moment, right? Like she doesn't have time. She has minimal information. Much of it is opposite of whatever she's known for her whole life. And she has to make that choice in the moment. And I know that there's been quite a lot of critique, actually, for how Violet acted going into Iron Flame. Like how she's a little bit difficult to read. Yeah. But I think it was a much more realistic way for Rebecca to write her, struggling with this worldview shift. And it's different for Violet than even the marked ones who got to see the evil side of Navarre themselves early on. I mean, they were kids, right? Violet was only raised in the good and the propaganda version of Navarre, with their clean, washed history being drilled into her. She has said and demonstrated how facts and history are central to who she is at her core, using them to calm her in her most intense and stressful moments. Everything she has just learned goes against that. She's quite literally thrown into an identity crisis. I don't blame her for needing a second to process.
Oh my gosh. And this is all while she's having to make a decision at that moment that could cost her her life.
And what else, honestly, what other choice could she have made? Either just trust them or what? Not trust them and then technically could have left. I'm really glad she didn't, though. What she agreed to was going to Athben. She said she believed him. Yeah. Okay, they don't know they're going to see the venom at Athben. They think that they're going to war games. So she's like, all right, let's just go quickly. So she didn't really know right then that she's making that life or death choice.
Let's go get an A on this assignment is what this girl is thinking.
By the time she gets over to Athben, she actually sees the venom in person. So she actually doesn't have to make necessarily that choice. And it's spelled out for her on that missive. It's quite literally the proposition they're given proves to her that Navarre is not the good side because they're willing to risk all of those civilians' lives. Yeah. Not risk it. Yeah. Let them die. Quite literally for a loyalty test.
I do like that she made all these decisions before having the proof.
Like to trust him. Yeah. Yeah. She was already thinking through that. Yeah, I agree. It just set up for a really good twist again. Like they just don't stop. Okay. All about to say, this is why I 100% understand her reaction through all of this. But I also 100% understand Xaden's perspective. You guys knew it was coming. All right. He explains that he couldn't tell her sooner because Dane could steal her memory and put everything at risk. Which is exactly what we see unfold. Which we should have seen coming. I read that and I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I still didn't catch it until it was on the page in front of me. He was saying it to her.
It took us until this reread to find where Dane had taken this memory from her.
Well, he touched her face so many times. Yeah. And that month jump really does throw you. But this is why I do not blame Xaden for keeping this from Violet. Violet's feelings are valid, but Xaden is also right. This is bigger than either of the two of them.
And here, she still doesn't quite believe that Dane would or could do something like that. She has unwarranted faith that Dane would choose her over the rules.
Yeah, she quickly goes back and she's like, oh, but he
would never.
He has put the rules first before. So she connected that. Another reason I will defend Xaden till the day that I die, Rebecca, do not make me regret saying that, is that he watched his own father executed for trying to help the very same people and says that he couldn't risk losing her too. When I tell you, I'm getting pissed off, that my heart broke when Violet, and again, I get it, guys, but let me have a moment. When she interrupted him saying that he loves her to correct him with loved, especially knowing how long Xaden has loved her before this moment, him shouting in front of everyone, "Love, you love me," it made me not like Violet in that moment.
Ugh. I understand why she couldn't say it.
But she didn't have to not say it. She just didn't have to say it. She corrected him. Like, she could have just been silent. It was uncalled for. Just kidding. I get it.
But you're right. It's not fair to Xaden, but it's also not fair to Violet.
No, they're both in the right.
It was just so painful all around. And whenever I say this, I don't mean this in a bad way, but Xaden was just so desperate here.
Yeah.
He was desperate for her not to give up on them whenever he was trying to keep everyone safe. And he just doesn't want to lose her like he did his father. And that's so devastating.
Well, it is. And it's one of the things that I love about this series, because on a first read, I'm 100% with Violet's perspective, right? Like, that moment still gets me. Still got me on the first read, because I'm like, oh, whoa, hold your horses, girl. That man can wield shadows. Like, let's give him cut him some slack here. But we're not able to understand the choices in the first read that other characters are making. But now on rereads, I get it.
Yeah, it really is all about perspective. And I think with Xaden's POV chapters, I think that helps us cut Xaden all sorts of slack, because we understand how deeply he cares for her. We didn't know that our first read.
And also, he seems very cold to her, which you're pointing out on a first read, which could be perceived in moments cold to her. Now that we know, we're like fully perceiving it differently. But to her, there's a lot of moments where she does just think, she takes so long to even trust that he's not after her to kill her. And then now she's finding out how much she doesn't know, you know? Yeah. It's more fun to defend Xaden anyway.
True.
Like, so they land at the Athben outpost and realize that it's empty. And both Garrick and Xaden point out that they wouldn't empty out one of the most strategic garrisons just for war games, which we know is true because the letter Violet found in her mother's office told us that it was abandoned due to consistent attacks and lack of reinforcements. So Colonel Atos took advantage of this and set them up, likely knowing about the Venin attacking a nearby village days before. So, knowing they were around. Xaden then puts the pieces together, asking Violet if Dane touched her after he told her about Athben. There we fucking go.
Ugh.
It's this next line that I have to point out. Violet says, "I would know if he read my memories." And Xaden says, "No violence. Trust me, you wouldn't." Because Xaden reads her intentions and technically her thoughts, and she does not know.
Exactly. Rebecca was so not subtle with this foreshadowing of Xaden's second signet, and I completely missed it. I'm wondering, and I'm wondering if you're wondering this too, when we find out Violet's second signet, will it slap us in the face like this? Especially since she said she thought it was super obvious.
Yeah, no, yeah. It is reasons exactly like this that I do not put it past Rebecca to be obvious. Because she loves to, as you put it, hide in plain sight. Exhibit A. Our podcast is exhibit, how many hours did we say?
30.
Like 30. So yes, I 100% think that it will be so obvious after we get confirmation that we're going to be doing this. After Onyx Storm with Iron Flame, we're going to be like, it was right here this whole time.
Like,
she used it this place, this place, this place, which is why I'm excited that we're actually waiting to like do our Iron Flame deep dive after we get Onyx Storm, because we'll be able to pick up all those things. And just like we're doing with this one.
Yeah.
But in this situation, Violet realizes that Dane must have stolen her memories, because this is not War Games. They had been sent here to die. And what a quick display for Violet of exactly why Xaden couldn't tell her the very things that she feels betrayed over. And the fact that Xaden made sure to tell her that this wasn't her fault before going full wing leader mode. I don't think I have to say it anymore, but guys, I stand by all of Xaden's decisions.
Definitely. Same. I am so glad that he reiterated that it was not Violet's fault, because I would definitely feel like it was my fault if I was in Violet's shoes there.
Yeah, that's why I think it's such a great display. Because she could have went on forever being like, oh, he would never do that. You could trust me. Tell me everything. And being not understanding of why Xaden couldn't tell her. And literally, she's just connected immediately why. So I really like, honestly, how that twist was written to really come full circle. But back to Dane. I understand now that Dane didn't intentionally steal her memory. Didn't know that they were being sent here to die, all of that. But on my first read, I was fucking livid. I was so caught off guard that he had even been doing that at all. I did not put the pieces together that he told us. He directly told Violet that he has to touch someone's face. And I think I was so focused on the fact that like cupping someone's face is so weird.
And he said temple.
Oh, he did. Okay, so but still.
Yeah.
Still, like I thought for sure on the first read that he knew. Specifically because of his "I'll miss you, Violet" comment.
Same here. I was sure that he knew what was going to happen to them and essentially sent them off to die. So in hindsight, I'm not mad at Dane for taking the memory, because it was an accident. What he did afterwards, however, was not an accident. But he didn't know exactly what was waiting for them, so I will offer him a tiny, tiny bit of grace there.
That's progress for you, so. You know, Rebecca has said that in this situation, he was just trusting his dad.
Yeah.
And for that specifically, I cannot fault him. I can't.
Yeah.
Even the act of going to his dad, like I can't fault him for it. Because he learned his lesson and we see him make a different choice in Iron Flame with new information, which is a hell of a lot of character growth, right? Like that is what you want out of an apology is
change.
Yeah, and he did when he was faced with trusting his dad again or not, right?
Yeah.
And he chose Violet. And I know that I've critiqued that redemption arc. It is a great full circle redemption for us being upset with him about this choice. But I think, and we've talked about it before, that there's some sort of missing, like Rebecca is missing why most of the readers that dislike Dane, I can't speak for all of them, it is because of everything he's done prior to the face stealing moment. So I need a redemption for those things.
Yeah.
This is redeemed.
100% agree.
I need the rest of his character to be fleshed out with like the protecting thing. I pulled this quote the other day from the London Q&A. I wish I would have put it in here, but Rebecca says that Xaden protects Violet by giving her the tools that she needs to protect herself. Dane protects her because he doesn't think she can protect herself.
And I hate that.
And so it's strange because she said that's the difference between them. That's what we don't like about him. Like, it's not this memory thing. I still think that fueled my dislike for him.
Yeah.
But I've tried to be very reasonable throughout this season. And I think I've done a decent job. But yeah, I still haven't. I need that redemption. If she wants a strong redemption arc, it's got to come back to him displaying that he trusts her to handle her own and supporting her in that way. I need that. I need to see that.
These are not the reasons that I dislike Dane so much. I can forgive this and move on.
Right.
But honestly, Dane, it's on sight.
As of right now, yeah. Which he strangely, spoiler if you haven't read the Onyx Storm excerpt, skip ahead a couple seconds. He's not mentioned in the excerpt. He's like, when we talk about this in our reactions.
We were like, who's mentioned and who's missing? And we were like, Dane is missing from this.
Like, no reference at all, which is
none.
Interesting. It's notable. I don't know what it means, but it's notable. All right.
Time to head on over to the Healer's Quadrant to get a temperature check on our characters, our favorite moments, and quotes.
My hot this week is Tern for his ability to thoroughly apologize.
Yeah, it was hard to have a favorite for these set of chapters, but
slim pickets.
Yeah, I also think Tern for the same reason.
Mm-hmm. And again, he's still in the wrong there. Like, it's as barely sizzling hot this week. It's not very hot.
It's lukewarm.
It's a lukewarm. There we go. That's the Yep. The knots. Sorry, guys, I can't put Xaden on here. I also can't put Dane on here. I think that everyone was in the right with the information and decisions that they had in this set of chapters.
Yeah, I think you're right because everyone was doing their best, but it's just sucked so much for Violet. There was no other options. I am, however, still a Dane hater.
Yes, we know. I guess Violet could be on the hot. She handled it pretty freaking well.
Yeah, better than I would have.
Yeah, especially because, like, she also has had no sleep. They pulled an all-nighter out of it for me. I can't function without sleep. Mm-mm.
As a sleepy girl, I would have not done well.
I would not have done anything. I'd have been like, I'm gonna nap.
I would have still been asleep by the river.
Which Xaden told her, when we get over to Athman, I need you to rest.
Yeah.
But they don't get the chance. So, that's important to remember as we, one, critique her emotional reactions, like her with the whole loved thing. Like, this girl had no sleep. I no longer can blame her, honestly, now that I think of that.
Everything is justified.
It is. Everyone is in the wrong and the right. Right? So, it's favorite moments. Mine, again, slim pickings. When Darna said that the griffins look tasty. The rest of the moments, though, are just hurtful, so they can't necessarily be favorites.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard, again, to pick a favorite moment because of how heavy everything got. Mm-hmm. But I think mine might be how Tern let Violet come to her own conclusions and said, I chose you for your intelligence and courage. Just because I always love a moment where Violet's strengths are pointed out beyond her signet. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's just a reminder that she really did defeat all the odds. Yeah,
that is a really good one. I also have to give it to Xaden's Shadow Daddy moment about that Sorengale. So,
Sorengale.
Yep. All right. Favorite quotes. I do have a couple of these. Xaden, while he's massaging Violet's thighs, quote, "Trust me, my motives aren't altruistic violence. I'll take any excuse I can to put my hands on you."
Okay.
Yes, sir. Okay, next one. I'm way too fucking greedy when it comes to you. All right. Yep. And they're all Zayden, guys. Who would have thought, right?
Surprise!
I've been yours longer than you could ever imagine. Hello.
Oh my gosh.
What a bounce.
Mine
set.
is from Violet, which is also balancing your Zayden's out. And it's when Violet says, I was thinking you are exactly as I predicted the first time you took me in my room. A dangerous addiction, impossible to sate.
Yeah. I love them.
Oh.
Now let's stop by the Scribe Quadrant for our Epigraph Analysis, starting with Chapter 34.
The first known Griffin attack occurred in 1 AU after unification near what is now the trading post of Resin. At the edge of the dragon-protected border, the post has always been vulnerable to attack, and over the course of the past 6 centuries, has changed hands no less than 11 times in what has become a never-ending war to secure our borders from our power-hungry enemies. Navarre, an unedited history by Colonel Lewis Markham.
I'd like to point out first, unedited history. I really want to organize all of the epigraphs into specific, like what's unedited, like what is
unauthorized.
The things that Navarre hasn't washed. And I'm going to tell you why this epigraph is actually quite important and gives us a lot of context. So this was setting up for the next chapter where Zayden is given 2 options on the missive. Saving the enemy village of Resin from the venom, or demonstrating their loyalty to Navarre by leaving them to die. Let me put that into perspective. Navarre knows that those people will die, put it in the faces of these marked ones and said, either you watch them die and then you go be loyal to us, you do your duty, wing leader, or you help them. While it's awful to use innocents as pawns at all, this epigraph makes it even more of an egregious act by Colonel Atos because the citizens of Resin have been both Navarrian and Paromish at 11 different points in the last 600 years. That means that those very citizens have previously been many times Navarrian citizens that they're now calling the quote-unquote enemy village and are leaving them to die as part of a test of loyalty. Okay. This is an important lesson. Borders are made up. It's quite literally a made-up border that this village has switched between, that has shifted time and time again. That is the only difference. Yet they're enemy now.
It's a lot.
That is a political lesson.
Yeah.
That is a moral lesson. What we've talked about on this podcast many times that Rebecca's a history major, and she really wanted to emphasize like erasing history, how dangerous that can be to leave certain parts out, or have an authorized versus unauthorized edition and seeing what people clean up, what they hide away, what they don't tell people. That is awful.
Oh, and it's tough to read now.
Yeah, knowing especially that they were their people.
Yeah.
At one point. That is egregious. The next epigraph, chapter 35.
In his last days of interrogation, Fen Ryerson lost touch with reality, railing against the kingdom of Navarre. He accused King Tari and all who came before him of a conspiracy so vast, so unspeakable, that it does not bear repeating by this historian. The execution was swift and merciful for a madman who cost untold lives. Navarre, an unedited history by Colonel Lewis Markham.
Unedited. That's interesting because my interpretation of this is it's a clear reframing to paint Fen Ryerson the leader of the rebellion, as crazy to justify his execution. It's interesting that it's unedited, though.
Yeah.
Because you'd think that that would be more accurate, but it's also showing that even people's interpretations, maybe. This is also Colonel Markham writing this, Professor Markham. So the obvious thing that comes to mind when thinking of what conspiracy they're referencing is that Navarre lies to all of its citizens, has rewritten their history, all to make them think Venin aren't real, so that they don't rebel against the idea of leaving innocent people outside of the wards to die by the Venin. It does make me wonder if it goes deeper than we know.
It has to.
That alone is enough for me to think that they would call him a madman. They had to justify executing him and all of the rest of them, right? Like, no one would believe him because they've erased their history.
Yeah.
Years and years and years. But yeah, it's suspicious. I wonder if there's going to be more that there's got to be. There's got to be more secrets that we don't know, more things that they're hiding that he started speaking about in the middle of his interrogation. Guys, these epigraphs get me riled up.
Especially whenever some of them are really just, this is what happens in this chapter. Mm-hmm. But then you have ones like this, where you're just like, oh. Yeah. And looking at who wrote it.
Mm-hmm. Who wrote it is always.
That's.
Well, and Rebecca has said she sprinkled in Easter eggs for book 3, 4, and 5 in this book. Yeah. And of course, we know book 2 as well, but it's things like this that make me go, there's more to this. There's more to all of these epigraphs. Honestly, I think there's more too. There's some, like you said, like that there's just like, oh, well, that doesn't seem like it's much. This feels like it's loaded.
Yeah.
Whew. Time to join our riot as we take flight into our foreshadowing, overarching questions, and theories section. Starting off with, quote, my heart pounds so hard it sounds like wing beats in my ears. Well, quick turnaround to this foreshadowing. It was, in fact, wing beats. It was Griffin Riders. So that was when Xaden and Violet were making out on the lake. It reminded me of a similar thing that happened in Iron Flame where Xaden had just told her about his second signet, and she says that she hears something. I can't remember what exactly it was. Buzzing, something like that. And it turned out to be a horde of wyvern. So interesting parallel there. Next, on page 442, Violet thinks to herself, his father may have been the great betrayer, may have cost my brother his life, but Xaden's treachery cuts just as deep. He flinches as my eyes narrow into a glare. I am convinced that Xaden read these thoughts and heard this, especially because he says on the next page, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking I've betrayed our kingdom. Which, of course, duh, but this was a hiding in plain sight thing, which is even funnier because Violet literally says, you're a villain hiding in plain sight right after. Like within a few sentences.
Yeah.
Says that. And this was obvious, but I didn't put the literal events together until now. I don't know why or how, but Nolan, back in chapter 6, said that, quote, General Sorengale saved Navarre by capturing the great betrayer. In my brain, it had connected, of course, that Lilith was responsible for Xaden's dad's death. I just hadn't connected that she physically captured him during the rebellion after he supposedly shot Brennan.
Same. I kind of saw her more as an overseer of his death. And I didn't really think about her being the one to capture him.
Exactly that. I just thought like she was a part of like the team that went out, which makes it even more understandable why he wanted to kill Violet and Mira so badly. And also the fact that she captured his dad. His dad was executed. She had to feel guilt, which is good, because she then advocated for the marked ones. Well, before they were marked ones, they were just kids of the rebellion leaders, to not have to witness their parents' execution. And then she goes and makes the deal with Xaden. that is so much worse to know that she was like literally the one that captured him than just like a piece of a team that did, you know?
Yeah, you understand Xaden's anger and need for revenge.
And you understand her guilt a little bit more.
Yeah.
Why she was the one that was in charge of making this deal and stuff.
I do like that she does have a little bit of empathy or sympathy for the kids.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit more of Violet in there.
Yeah.
Also, of like that where Violet got her empathy from. Maybe? I don't.
Oh.
It's so hard.
I definitely, we need to know more about her dad. We've kind of
Yeah.
assumed that that's where it came from, but, you know, she grapples a lot with not wanting to be like her mom. And I think we're going to start to see that shift the more that she learns a little bit more about how her, because she doesn't really fully get to know that until the end of Iron Flame. And so I think that's going to be something that she, after her mom passed, you know, is going to grapple with. That's definitely going to be an aspect to Violet's inner struggle throughout Onyx Storm.
I can feel it already.
Mm-hmm.
And that wraps up chapters 34 and 35. Thank you so much for listening, and don't forget to join us for our next episode where we will deep dive into chapter 36.
There is a reason it will be the sole chapter that we are covering. Anyways, if you are looking for ways to support us so that we can continue to make high quality content, please leave us a review, check out our Patreon, give us a follow over on socials, and share to all of your Fourth Wing friends.
As always, we encourage you to email us all of your thoughts, theories, and suggestions. Drop them below if you are watching on YouTube, or join us over on Discord.
Until next week, dearest fantasy readers, prepare yourselves. Period. That's just prepare yourselves with some tissues as we continue our journey through the Empyrean series.
Can you
I'm
prepare?
kind of dreading next episode.
It ends here. Sorry. Chapter 36 doesn't exist.
We're doing it for you guys, though.